Okay, how's it going, guys? Sorry. I apologize for the camera angle. I just realized that my computer was not going to be able to stay alive, and so the only whatever, it doesn't matter. How's it going? Welcome to tonight's light stream. We're going to talk about the mysteries, which I think is an incredibly maligned and demonized subject, and it's really unfortunate because it is my belief that the mystery schools were basically a compendium, wherein was gathered the secret knowledge of nature and the systems of illumination and consciousness expansion that were known to people at the time. These were the repositories where these things were placed and guarded, and they have been systematically demonized by the institutionalized religions that have replaced them. And it's one of the great tragedies of human history. And, I just finished that reaction to Bill Cooper's Mystery School talks, and it is incredibly well researched. Yeah, I have to hand it to him. Whereas most of those guys just totally make stuff up without any regard for historical fact, or, he really, 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 really did dig deep. But unfortunately, his perception of it was clouded by a sort of Christianized and cultural. He had a very specific point of view that he was lenses that he was looking at the mysteries through, and I was informed of the mysteries by people like Terence McKenna and Aldous Huxley and Joseph Campbell, probably most importantly. And so, I luckily, before I had the chance to have my perception clouded and affected by Bill Cooper's book, Beyond the Pale Horse, I already knew what the mysteries were, and I knew that there was something wrong with Bill's point of view. And I don't know that a lot of people really understand the extent to which Bill is responsible for the modern movement of people that believes that the world is run by a satanic cabal of black magicians. I'm not saying there's no truth to that at all. In fact, there most certainly is. But the demonization of the mysteries and the techniques and traditions that they offer us is a huge mistake. Of course, any tool can be abused, and that has happened in the case of the mysteries. So this is probably definitely going to turn into a series of light streams and definitely a series of videos, because a subscriber has sort of commissioned me to do these reactions to Bill Cooper. And I do get a little bit triggered sometimes, because the reality is that the suppression of psychedelics, the suppression of all of these techniques of consciousness expansion that are offered by these non-Christian traditions, it really has set humanity back hundreds of years in every department. Um, People wasted away in prison cells for decades, having been arrested for selling, LSD or mushrooms in their early 20s. In one case that I'm personally familiar with, the police actually pressured this kid for 3 years. He wasn't even a drug dealer. When he finally broke and said, okay, fine, I'll do it as a favor this one time, they gave him 2 decades in prison. He was pardoned by Obama when he had like a year left to go. So, what were the mysteries really? That's a difficult question to answer. But the lineage of Pythagoras to Egypt is not disputed, I don't think. And my personal intuitive understanding, which I just discovered is reflected in the experiences of another South American shaman. This actually did surprise me a bit to see that these entities had told this other guy, this other ayahuasca shaman, the exact same stuff that they told me about Thoth and how the pyramids were built. So I sort of, I have one of the things that you develop, I guess, through the kinds of experiences that you will have if you engage in meditation and the use of psychedelics and yoga and whatever else. Um, Occasionally you'll receive intuitions that just seem to be coming from somewhere else. I've never made up my mind about what this particular voice in my head is, whether it is just my own subconscious or if it's an actual sort of holy guardian angel, as Aleister Crowley would have described it, or what. I think it's very healthy, by the way, to not uh, come to a conclusion about what these voices in our head might be, but the reality is that it oftentimes gives me usable um, information that it could not possibly have come by through ordinary means. And so it was in one such reverie with this part of my consciousness that I was told that basically the teachings in the Kybalion and what we think of as the Hermetic doctrine, the Hermetic teachings, and what was really understood by Plato and Pythagoras and the people in the Eleusinian mysteries came to us from a member of the Star Tribes who is not an Atlantean, as a lot of people suggest, named Thoth. Um, and it is also my understanding that these advanced races do not actually physically travel here. I don't understand what the UFO phenomena is about. If that's the case, I realize the US government's been releasing videos of even crystal clear UFOs at this point. Not sure what that's about, but in the case of this particular brand of Star Tribe visits, there's no reason for them to travel around physically. The light body that we generate, again, as a tool, that this is like a practice that is learned in the mysteries. The light body can be, you can send that around to do your communicating for you. And so at any rate, Thoth was a messenger of the all, as is described in the Kybalion, and he taught the Egyptian priests. And so these became the sanctuaries of the mysteries of Isis and Osiris and others at Heliopolis. And Pythagoras journeyed to Egypt, guided by an intuitive voice. And he brought these mysteries to Greece, where they were passed down. And so a lot of people have correctly traced the secret handshakes and the use of the pentagram and a lot of other things that are the Tractus of the Freemasons back to Pythagoras. And so from there, the mysteries became the Eleusinian rites and the rites of all sorts of other critters and beings, the Oracle at Delphi and all of this sort of stuff. And so after this original fracturing and splintering, there have been all sorts of variations on a theme that have arisen from the sands of Egypt. And so the truth of these systems is that they are really fundamentally based on individual gnosis, that the experience of divine revelation is something that cannot be there can be no intermediary. It's not that there shouldn't be, it's that there can't be. There can be someone that can show you the way to access your own portals, to encourage these kind of experiences, to create receptivity. There are practices that will allow you to increase your discipline and willpower so that you can actually make investitures of what you learn from these experiences. But there is no dogma that can be taught. There is no fable. There is no story that is passed down, about the advent of creation. All knowledge is gnosis, and it comes from direct observation. And it is precisely because the techniques of the mystery schools are just as reliable as any other, chemicals in a petri dish. You put this with that at a certain temperature and blam, that's how it is with this stuff because it's real. Um, there is no necessity to try to force yourself to conform to foolish rules of ancient date designed to make you feel great while you fold, spindle, and mutilate the unbelievers from a neighboring state. As Frank Zappa so poetically sang in the song "You Am What You Is." No, 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 no. It's on that album. "You Am What You Is." Go listen to the whole album. It's absolutely awesome. Um, but at any rate, and by the way, as it does say psilocybin enhanced, because I ate an awful lot of. I didn't really mean to go so hard, but it turns out that they're pretty potent when they're fresh, I guess. Um, So, I have to admit, I'm a little bit disappointed that there are only 4 people, but I guess it's Saturday night. Hopefully, people will watch this one on the rewind because I think I've been explaining this pretty well. And it's really important that people understand that the sanctuaries of the mysteries um, are not places where, satanic pedophiles rape children, which is what people like Bill Cooper have created in the minds of the millions and millions of people. And another element of that is unfortunate is that there are unscrupulous people that as psychedelics gain acceptance and spirituality becomes a larger and larger and larger trend, there are more and more people that are founding fake mystery schools. I actually confronted a guy that started a business called Earth Pulse, and I originally I had gone to meet with him because I thought he was a like-minded person. He was talking about opening a mystery school that would train people to facilitate ayahuasca, and it turned out that his ayahuasca facilitator had drank ayahuasca like 8 times the year before, he said, and now she felt she was ready to be a shaman. And when I asked him what lineages of the mysteries he had partaken in, he said, "Oh, I really need to get around to studying." And I had to ask him again, are you serious? You're charging $4,000 a student and you haven't started studying yet? And people are actually signing up for this in droves. And I've looked at their curriculum and it's completely dumb. It's basically just what you would, you Google spirituality and it's a bunch of buzzwords. So do watch out for that. One of the rules in the mysteries, and this is something that even Aleister Crowley observed, and he was quite the rascal, not nearly as evil as the conspiracy theorists would have you believe, in my humble opinion. Uh, but not even he would take money to teach the mysteries. That's one thing that is universally you don't you no real mystery school takes money. The Scottish Rite of Freemasonry can open doors to you that are invisible to the rest of the world. That is absolutely true. And your yearly fee for lodge maintenance will not exceed like $130, and they'll never ask you for any more money. You know what I mean? The OTO has yearly lodge fees. Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. There are some scammy fake versions online that will charge you a bunch of money, but that's a red flag right there. That $4,000 for a 3-month course in the mysteries, somebody's full of shit. Okay, so I wanted to rewind and go back to the fields of Eleusis, because there are still some mysteries in regards to the mysteries, right? Like the actual admittance and the secrets that were taught, the actual knowledge of the Eleusinian mysteries can only be gleaned by the fact that the people that we know attended were, 200, 300, 1,000 years ahead of the rest of the human race. I mean, seriously, you guys, Plato was writing about fucking atoms. That's where we got the name Atom, from a guy that attended the mystery schools 1,000 years ago, or whatever it was. Hella long. It was longer than that, 2,000 years ago, right, or more, 2,500. I don't know. Who cares? Appreciate you, Moshe. Also, shout out to Anthony for becoming a patron, which I really encourage everyone out there to do. We're demonetized, we get no money. So if you support my message or my mission, this live stream really is kind of a culmination of a lifetime of study and work that is ongoing. And this channel is an effort for me to share what I perceive because I've heard from people that it helps them, and so I do it. And it helps me to continue to do it if you make contributions via PayPal or Zelle or whatever. There's a big list of things that you can do there. There are certain elements of the, aside from the fact that the works of Aristotle and the other people that attended the mysteries give you some clues and indications about what was actually going on there. Man, I wish I had a more comfortable way to sit, but I had to rig this up like this so that I could do it at all because of our weird electrical situation here in the jungle in the Amazon rainforest. Which, by the way, if you would like to come out here and listen to me explain all of this stuff to you in person while sitting around a fire on ayahuasca, we are offering retreats here until the end of October, and we still have a few spaces open. I think for October, maybe only like 2 rooms or something. So please do join us. It would be amazing to just be full and not have to plug that anymore. But it is an amazing opportunity. I don't do it like anyone else. Although I have studied with indigenous people and we do work with them, like the ceremonies will involve local indigenous people, it's definitely a unique approach to ayahuasca, which again, by the way, is how shamanism is supposed to be done. You're not supposed to learn songs from a shaman and repeat them. You learn your own songs. And I was told by the Shuar teacher that if I was caught watching him a bit too much, do not watch the hands of your master. You must find your own way. As Aleister Crowley taught that, each man must cut his own path through the jungle. And so I have a very unique approach that incorporates traditional South American shamanic techniques and songs and that sort of thing with the things that I learned in the mystery traditions like the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. So it's definitely a unique twist on all of that. So we were talking about, you can glean some of what went on in the mysteries, what was discussed by looking at the writings of the people that attended. It's certainly true. You can sort of gather the fruits of their labors from the works that they left behind. And I think that the efficacy of the rites and the beverages, the kaikian at the Eleusinian rites, Soma of the Rig Veda is another one that we used, vague, sort of in that same part of the world. Probably the same plants, I think. The combination of these things catalyzed consciousness of the people that attended it to the point where it took the rest of the human race however long, 2,000 years, to catch up. And that's, your success, your success will be your proof. Right? That's how this stuff should work. It's not, there is no faith, there's certainty. When you're talking about cause and effect, if you do certain things, certain results will follow. So if you consume certain plants with a certain intention and under a certain set of circumstances with a certain protocol to follow, you'll experience certain results. And all of this stuff is quantifiable and repeatable, and it is both spiritual and scientific, which is the bridge that was formerly believed could not be crossed. And the reality is, people had figured out that you could do that a long time ago. And a big part of the reason for secrecy was not just to gain power over our fellow men, but to keep ourselves from being torn limb from limb by them, or burned alive at the stake, which they managed to do that to a lot of us. That was the fate of a lot of the early Gnostics. They were burned alive as heretics. The Templars certainly got the torch. You know what I mean? Humanity generally does not really appreciate it when people start to shine the light where none of them are willing or able to look. They feel insulted and threatened, because honestly, most of what the majority of humanity believes are comforting illusions that have absolutely no substantial reality to them. It turns out, though, that if you're willing to go forth into the light, your existence is just that much more fulfilling. There are more possibilities available to you. The universe becomes a co-creative entity, rather than either the superstitious fairy tale god that a lot of people believe in, or the blind, abjectly, what is the word? The materialistic universe. It's not that either. It's neither of those things. When you take two extremes, the truth is always in the middle. And the plants and practices of the mystery schools had no other purpose but to liberate and to accelerate the evolution of the initiate, in the interest of towing the line of human consciousness a little bit further, a little bit faster. That's it. That is all. Now, can this knowledge be used to, say, enslave and deceive and, the one thing in Bill Cooper's Mystery Babylon series that I do agree with is that the current batch of people at the absolute peak of the pyramid are there at least in part because their ancestors' consciousness was compelled to move at a much faster evolutionary pace than the rest of the human beings around them. They're clearly, their understanding of psychology was way beyond the rest of humanity, and that's what propaganda is, really. People like to talk about how they're, a bunch of inbred, whatever. And that's, true to an extent, but you remember who they're being informed by. And you can look throughout history and you'll see that this is actually true, that the European monarchs they took their counsel with magicians, and those magicians were initiates of these mysteries. John Dee and Edward Kelly are probably the two most famous mystery school rascals in history. And so, one of my points of divergence from the mainstream perception of what spirituality and illumination is that, people kind of believe in this Buddhist model that the more advanced you become on the spiritual path, the more docile and harmless you become, and that's not true. That's not how the universe works. Purity is not measured on a human scale of ethics. It's just not. Like, look at the universe. All you have to do is be willing to view the universe without your human influence, your bleeding heart humanity, and you can see that this is true. It's obviously the work of something intelligent, and it's obviously not entirely good. You know what I mean? So get over the myths. When, we realize that everything that we have been told was a fable and that none of it was real or true, we still cling to all of these parts and pieces that we hoped were true. And the things that we liked, we try to keep with us. What is that old Bob Dylan song? He says, the highway is for gamblers, you better use your sense. Take what you have gathered from coincidence. That's not the line I was trying to remember. Still a great song. It's all over now, baby blue. But yeah, the point is it's not real. Enlightenment is only becoming closer and closer and closer to being able to perceive the universe through the lens of omniscience, which is what the ever-present, pervasive consciousness that is the universe, that is the structure of the universe. That's what enlightenment is, and you can choose to be any part of it. You know what I mean? Like if there's the thing that animates the universe is not interested in only having good, loving, happy stories, or that's how it would be, right? People like to believe that it's all deviation from this loving creator's plan that has resulted in all the suffering and misery in the world. But that's not how it works. These are all just sort of fairy tale versions of the absolute truth that is governing the universe and that will continue to govern the universe whether you like it or not. And that's, you know, the mysteries, again, are only for those people that are prepared to live in that kind of reality. That, you know, you are going to make a choice, even having acquired this knowledge, that the deity is Adolf Hitler just as much as it is, you know, your perception of Santa Claus. Um, the universe is consciousness incarnate, and it is there for the experience, good or bad, pretty or ugly, light or dark. The way that Aleister Crowley put it is that the goal of the Abscissimus, which is the highest ranking category of the mysteries, is to become like he in whom suffering and glory are indistinguishable. Meaning that in the deity, it doesn't matter, it's all experience. And once all of those possible experiences have been fulfilled, it will collapse back into a point that some people have called nothingness, and then the whole process will start again. And this is the phoenix process, the blinking of the eye of Shiva. The Hindus talked about this. Quantum loop theory now has it. Um, and so, yeah, this is why we have also the left-hand path and the right-hand path in mystery schools. There are, in the path of every magician, whether you're talking about a South American shaman or an initiate of the Western mystery tradition, there's a point where you have to decide, are you working for your own selfish interest and nothing else, or are you working for the collective? And most people would think, well, the wise choice is to say the collective, because you're part of the collective, so you're going to support the collective. And that is what very often happens. That is, you know, the choice that I have made, you know, to do my best to try to be selfless. And honestly, for me, it's not even a choice. I am just kind of expressing my own nature. I don't try to conform to any kind of belief system or ideas about myself or the universe. I do what's natural to me. And this is another result, actually, of these mystery school experiences and psychedelics, is that you can discover what your ultimate nature is. The idea is that everyone has this, and through certain processes, you can overcome cultural conditioning, and you can connect with your fundamental purpose, and then you can live in accordance with that. And really, you know, the reason that people are unhappy is that our society is not engineered around that. Um, you know, in fact, a lot of the zombies in the Matrix world, I've noticed, when you start to talk like me, they get like this kind of nasty, like, oh, so you just do whatever you want for on. It's like, yeah, or you're gonna end up like you. You know what I mean? Like, you hate your wife, you hate your job, you hate everything, and like you're just forcing yourself through life. Like, what the fuck are you even doing it for? From my point of view, you know, it's always blown my mind when people, but I think it's because they feel like they have no choice. Um, and the idea in the mysteries is to provide people, part of it, with the tools to allow them to have both a spiritual life and some sort of financial and material world ability. Um, you know, and you'll find, and I made this mistake for unfortunate periods in my early life. I the, the 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 narrative that's being sold to people in pop culture spirituality is that you can just sort of manifest things with your thoughts. It's not entirely untrue. In fact, it's not untrue at all. But as we're going to see, because I did fix my issue with the lag, I'm going to do the debunking of New Age gurus and channelers and whatnot that I had planned for the other night. So stay tuned for that. I do have to keep an eye on the time as well, because we're going to meet a person that's coming to our retreat. Um, so I have to keep an awareness of the time, arriving late. And also, if you guys have any questions or comments, I'm totally open to some dialogue. This has been just me talking this entire time, and I apologize if it's a little bit disjointed. Psilocybin was a little bit stronger than I was anticipating, but honestly, I think it's probably best to let the mushroom do the talking, because that's what those kind of experiences really are about. So why don't we talk about Hermes and Eleusis? So I started to talk about how the Star Tribe ambassador named Thoth brought the mysteries to Egypt, according to my own intuitive experience. And then this ayahuascqa, apparently somebody just told me this the other day, wrote a book where, because I was suggesting that it was contact with these higher dimensional realities via Acacia mixed with Syrian rue that was consumed in the mysteries that allowed them to build the pyramids. The Japanese, for example, attempted to cut stone with the level of accuracy that the ancient Egyptians had using modern technology, and they failed, right? So, granting the objection that why the hell would aliens care to build these giant pain-in-the-ass pyramids here? It's a good point, and in my opinion, why would they even be here? So an alternate theory would be that it was contact through with these higher dimensions that allowed the Egyptians to conceptualize and execute these things that we can't reproduce now. And the reason we can't reproduce them is because the people that are trying are not using DMT. The universe is rectifying that mistake as we speak. So it's going to be really interesting, I think, to see the real impact of the destigmatization of psychedelics. And I think also when we look around the world and we see all of these insurmountable problems, the absurdly narrow vantage point of a single ego that a lot of these monkeys are trying to view the universe through is about to be shattered. And as people, as psychedelics gain acceptance, there's very little resistance to overcome once that happens, right? The cultural prohibition and the legal actually, that used to shock the hell out of me, that I would ask people, why don't you use psychedelics? And they would say, well, they're illegal. And I just thought, what the fuck does that have to do with it? I mean, look, you guys, one of the rules of life should actually be that you will only acknowledge laws that make sense. And that's actually prescribed to mystery school initiates, that you will only obey laws that are in accordance with what is true and fair and correct. And regulating people's consciousness is well beyond the scope of any government's right. Clearly, that's not cool. Nor is it tolerable, right? I mean, you guys do me a favor too, hit the like button, share, support us on Patreon, Zelle, PayPal, or however you like. The blinking of the eye of Shiva, yeah, okay, so we can talk about that for a second. It's this idea that we sleep when God is awake, and we are awake when God is sleeping. And I would venture to reckon that the period that we're experiencing right now is the twilight. That's why things are the way they are. It's like, when you're starting to wake up and you sort of have an overlay of dream reality and real reality, and you're like, oh, what the hell is... That's what's happening at the moment, I think. And so it is also said that when the eye opens all the way, the universe is destroyed. And all of this is very interesting to me, because since I was a kid, my understanding of the universe was that there was this nothingness and it became aware of itself, and that awareness created a division, which was basically the introduction of duality. This is why there's the demonization of the consumption of the hallucinogenic plant in Genesis, and the idea that that knowledge caused the descent into matter, right? That's why this God is like, no, 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 don't do that, because that's actually what God itself did. You know, it's not like, it's not, we have to get rid of these old school ideas about how these things went down, but that's just like a fairy tale explanation of something that actually happened. The descent of matter was initiated or catalyzed by awareness itself, because it created division, because originally there was nothing, and as soon as nothing became conscious, it made a bad bargain. That bad bargain started to replicate in this dualistic framework, and so here we are. And then what happens is that eventually, once this process of reflection and replication, or replication by way of reflection, exhausts all the possibilities that are within its reach, without violating any of the natural laws, right? There are strictures that are imposed upon this consciousness by the rules of its own game, that are only there because they have to be. That's, you know, Albert Pike, the 33rd degree Mason, wrote in Morals and Dogma of this, that they're not its rules because they're not just because they are his laws. They are his laws because they are just. And that was a reference to this, right? He was saying his laws, as in God's laws, people should not follow them just because they think that God mandated it. The rules of the universe are as they are because creation had to be conceptualized and executed within a certain framework, or it just couldn't happen. That's what he was expressing there very succinctly. And that kind of expression also is designed for people that are right on the edge of understanding, to knock them over the fence, where they're like, oh shit, wow. Okay, so then once all of the possibilities are fulfilled, it collapses back into itself, and then because energy cannot really be destroyed, it's just that you could think of it as like membranes, or the forces that kept things separate are now gone, so it collapses back in on itself, but all that energy is still there. So once it condenses to this super minuscule point that we call the singularity, the process reverses because it has nowhere else to go, and the process of creation starts over from exactly the point where it did before. This opening and closing of the Eye of Shiva is even represented in our digital coding with the 1 and the 0, is the opening, the transformation of the lingam to the yoni, or the 1 becomes a 0, and you can think of it like the 1 is a line, but it is the inside of that line that expands with nothingness in order to create the circle that contains the space. And so, yeah, that's the Hindu conception of the blinking of the Eye of Shiva. So imagine my surprise, as I got older, to see that these ideas existed already in these systems of mysticism, and even more interesting, I guess, recently to read about quantum loop theory, which is basically physicists who think that the universe operates in the way that I've described. I think it's all kind of like self-evident, and it's not really even that big of a deal to have figured all this stuff out, honestly. I think without our conditioning and misdirection, everyone just kind of knows this stuff. This is why Terence McKenna said that if the truth can be told so as to be understood, it will be believed. We are resonant expressions of this original consciousness, and so we contain all of the information. you know, Tim Leary believed this, and now people talk about it with like 0 point energy, that or people call it the Akashic record, where, you know, every transaction, every energetic state, every mathematical expression that had ever occurred always is there in the 0 point field. And so we are able to recollect all the way to the Big Bang under the right circumstances. And so the idea, again, is that whether we're talking about the ecstasy that was induced, that Bill Cooper was warning against, that was the most unfortunate part of my mystery school reaction, is that my editing was terrible because I was getting really annoyed because I was learning DaVinci Resolve for the first time, and by the time it came time to rewatch it and just print it, I was just like, fuck it, get this thing out of here. So, and then we had hell exporting it because I did it in 4K, and it took up like half of our memory. So, anyways, I left out this one section where Bill had actually said that the ecstasy leaves people subject to the dominion of others, ruled by other people, and that's exactly the opposite of what it does. The person who has had gnosis is not in need of governance, and therefore will refuse to be governed. So sorry, Bill, major fucking L on that assertion, man. That's just like there were some moments watching that where I was just like dumbfounded by the absolute dumbfuckery of the positions that he was taking. I respect all the work that he did, but man, did he come out with just the ass backwardest conclusion about a lot of this stuff. But I accidentally edited out my reaction to that, which I guess I just gave you. But it was also the point that I was going to offer is, what about the Christian mystic then, Bill? What are these people who are saying I gave my heart to Jesus? Like, what are they saying then? Like, what are you saying? Like, if religious ecstasy is bad, which is his fundamental argument, then you say you're a Christian, so what? Are you suspicious of what happened to you? You know? And that's, you know, obviously that's the whole problem with belief, and that is why, as a mystery school initiate and a sensible human being, I don't believe anything I think, and I don't believe anything you think, and I don't believe anything that anyone thinks, even the universal mind. Because properly understood, the universe is consciousness, right? But it is not infallible. Why would anyone think that it is? It's just a mind. Even if you have access on ayahuasca, for example, to this greater mind, I have to say that I've never gotten false information from a DMT entity or an ayahuasca spirit, or however you want to think of them. But it's still, you know, to me, just access to a greater mind. This sort of mentality protects people from, you know, there's a voice in your head, therefore it has dominion over you. Like that, if that's what Bill was warning about, the kind of belief that he apparently had, then yeah, you should not have that. So religious ecstasy that results in belief is not good and is really scary and gets people blown up and stuff. But yeah, I thought it was unfortunate that I didn't get my reaction to that, because I just thought, you know, here's a Christian saying that religious ecstasy is negative, and like, is he thinking about what's coming out of his mouth before he's saying it, or does it just like, is that not part of the process? I don't know. I would suggest that maybe he doesn't either. Russell, I don't think that self-realized applies to Christ or Karoli Baba or Ramana Maharishi. Are you aware of Anton R. Todd? I've heard the name. I've heard the name, but I can't place. Um, um, Actually, I don't know who Neem Karol Baba or Ramana Maharishi are, but Christ didn't exist. Um, and he was a composite figure that was derived by um, taking aspects of older myths and sort of splicing them together. His ministry was based on the campaign of Titus. So everywhere that Jesus stopped and spoke um, was just one of the battles, and they're in the same order and everything. I mean, it's just there was no such thing as Jesus. And all that he taught was just basic morality. The one thing I will say about that is that the highest expression of spiritual teaching that is possible, and the only thing that anyone needs to know and follow, is love your brother as you would yourself. And that, if you just take that one single line, and that is, if that is all, you know, if you sincerely believe that and that makes you a Christian, then I'm a Christian. Um, I'll go right along with that one. Um, and it's probably the highest, you know, as far as like succinct, you know, direct expressions of what it all means. Like that is it basically. If you choose the right hand path, if you're a white hat. If not, then that doesn't mean anything. And it's interesting to note that in the mystery tradition, the white hats acknowledge the black hats. They don't look down on them. You don't look down on the brothers of the left-hand path. In fact, you understand that they're making a sacrifice. It may be a very selfish sacrifice, but it's a sacrifice nevertheless. It's a role that some individual unit of consciousness has to play, otherwise it would not exist. And so we all understand that, you know, because antinomies are, the interplay of antinomies is what gives birth to the universe, right? This is where opposites create each other. So the brothers of the left-hand path, although in a way we wish they weren't there, they have to exist and they have to do what they do. Otherwise, we would just have nothing. You know, and I think about that as a metaphysical reality. But then when I try to consider it as just on a deterministic level, it doesn't seem necessary. It seems that if we just have, you know, nice people doing nice things, then we just have nice people doing nice things, and that, you know, this idea that opposites are required to create each other. But I think it actually, you know, if you just look at how energy works and how the universe is constructed, it actually justifies this position, justifies itself in the end. And again, it's like Albert Pike said that they're not his rules because they're just. They're not just because they are his rules. They're his rules because they are just. And in this case, just doesn't mean fair. It means that they're the way they are because they couldn't be any other way. So, yeah, John Richards knew what was going to happen when someone brought up Jesus. So where were we at, though? We were talking about the mysteries and Demeter and Persephone and the actual story of the Eleusinian mysteries, and the idea that Hermes was a star tribe member, and what that could actually mean, because it does not necessarily mean space alien. It doesn't necessarily mean that. In fact, the current conception of the gray alien that we have is either accurate or I've seen them. I ran into 7 other people that saw them in the same town on the same night that I did. They were translucent though, like they weren't actually there. Everyone that saw them in their way. It was myself, Joe, Clint, Topher, the pot brewer guy. So 5 people and his son, so 6 people, I guess. Just trying to make sure my stories are historically accurate. But yeah, that's weird that we all had these encounters in the same night in the same town, but everyone made a point of mentioning that they were translucent. And so there was a guy named Jack Parsons that worked with Aleister Crowley way back in the day. He was a early NASA rocket scientist, and they did this Paris working, I think is what it was called, where they opened up what they described as a portal. I mean, we might call it a wormhole, and this thing that Crowley called a lamb emerged from the wormhole, and they drew a picture of it in his diary, and it looks exactly like a gray alien. But it was not necessarily a space alien. We're talking about interdimensionals. It's also it's also worthy of mention, I think. Or at least it was before I read the comments and got distracted. All right, so we're talking about the Greys and their interdimensionality as a possibility. I'm just trying. Okay, so yeah, I mean it's just valid to consider that DMT entity sort of realm for Thoth as a space tribe guy. You know what I mean? That's kind of where to place this conceptualization. So Hermes is the Greek Thoth, right? So in the Greek mysteries, it was basically a celebration of Demeter and Persephone, the Eleusinian mysteries specifically. And in this myth, Persephone, who is basically a personification of spring, it's her job to paint all the flowers on Earth. You could also interpret that as like seductive beauty. But so one day she was sitting with a water nymph and a narcissist flower. This is often left out of the telling of this. A narcissist flower suddenly trembled, and Hades came up from the underworld and took Persephone, who made the mistake of consuming some pomegranate seeds. Pomegranate still is held as the ritual fruit, is signifying the blood, the pomegranate juice. Israel Regardie's famous book, A Garden of Pomegranates, the title is lost on a lot of people because it's actually a book about the Kabbalistic tree of life. And they're like, why the hell is it pomegranate? I don't know. Maybe if you're reading that book, you have gotten that deep into the subject and you know why he's... Anyways, so pomegranate, symbolic of blood. She has consumed some food in the underworld, which means that she can't leave, but it wasn't much food. It was just a little bit of blood, I guess. And so she's allowed to leave the underworld for half of the year. But it is Hermes, who is a psychopomp and deliverer of souls from the underworld or to the underworld. But there are some things to consider about what that actually means to people. And when we think of metaphysical truths and realities, people say you will know when you die and that sort of thing. Can you guys hear the Quichua partying out there? I always wonder. playing traditional music and thumping pretty hard. They have pretty loud speakers in the modern world. Sometimes, unfortunately, what the hell was I talking about before the Quichua's thumping bass? Oh, Hermes, right? So we say stuff like that, that you'll know when you die, and we sort of associate the realm of death with this, spiritual knowledge sort of comes from there, I guess. And so Hermes rescues Persephone and brings her back to Earth, because without Persephone, there would be no blooming flowers. So when we talk about, Hermetic secret societies, which is, we in the current world, we have kind of lost our connection to the Eleusinian mysteries. We're not an agrarian society really so much anymore. And the Eleusinian mysteries were hella a long time ago, and people don't read a lot anymore. I've seen guys on TikTok walk around with cameras asking Gen Z people if they can name a book, and they're like, not trying to rag on Gen Z. I'm sure there's all sorts of remarkable young pronounless creatures running around out there. So Hermes, as this sort of representative of this knowledge that regenerates the world, is definitely can be equated with Redeemer and ultimately the metaphysical knowledge. In fact, Christ and the number 8 and the planet Mercury and a whole bunch of other things, that was part of the pool from which they derived the myth of Christ. That's one of the earlier stories that, but in the case of Hermes in the Hermetic tradition, so this original Eleusinian stuff, right? It's not that it was originally Eleusinian, but this myth, I guess, embodies and offers an explanation and a hint to the meaning of Hermetic and why Hermes is so important, and why the knowledge and teachings of these mysteries is so important, and the nature of them, right? They're not of this world, but when they're brought to this world, they regenerate the earth and make it beautiful and worth inhabiting. And so it's interesting that even though, here's another thing, like the Hermetic secret society is the way that we understand Hermetic, most of us in the modern vernacular, I guess, is not actually got anything to do with the Hermeticism of the 3rd century, which was largely just a variation of Christianity. It's weird that Hermeticism managed to kind of cloak itself in this like historical curiosity and then emerge as what it used to was in the modern world, that shape-shifting devil. Interestingly as well, the Christian right wing likes to associate the mystery schools and all of these teachings with Lucifer and the devil, and basically that comes from the idea that anything that's not Christian and is spiritual is evil, which is, of course, the complete opposite of reality. Like, Christianity was basically designed to preclude the possibility of real spiritual experience in the people that adopt it, that accept Christ into their heart. At least the form of it, where you go to church and you're told what to think. So it's really, in my mind, the greatest blasphemy possible to actually create spiritual systems, the purpose of which is to curtail people's spiritual development and ensure that it doesn't happen. And that's really what religion is. Religion, the root word is religio, and it basically means to bind, which in this case is to bind your mind to servitude, to a lack of illumination, to bind people to, let's leave it at servitude. I mean, that's really the purpose of institutionalized religion. And the purpose of the mysteries is, again, the exact opposite. It's about catapulting consciousness, and if your success is your proof, look at how far ahead of the rest of the world. Even Aleister Crowley, you look at his writings, and regardless of what you think of him as a person, he was talking about how the governments would be behaving right now, the fact that people would become more bisexual and epicene, which means that they're of indeterminate sex. His descriptions, it's astounding. So the proof that the mysteries, that people that have taken initiation and have availed themselves of the tools of the mysteries are well ahead of the rest of the human race, is absolutely, the proof is in the pudding. I would encourage everyone to eat heaping piles of it. As far as what sacrament was used in the rites, people have suggested, as Albert Hoffman did, that it was a beer made from fermented ergot, and that crazy son of a bitch actually tried this. He actually brewed ergot fungus beer and said that it was psychedelic, it was psychoactive. And I don't know that the Eleusinian fields were full of rye. I would be interested to look and see exactly what grain was grown. If they weren't just a metaphorical place. I've honestly never even thought about it, but if the Eleusinian fields were actually a physical place, and rye was grown there, then I would probably go with Hoffman's theory. The thing is that if you consume ergot raw, the symptoms are not pleasant. You're not going to just trip and have a fun time. You're going to have gangrene-like symptoms. Your limbs are going to rot off. It's not going to be good. But you will hallucinate and kind of go insane. So there's some similarities with LSD experience, I guess. But yeah, your limbs rot off and you die. In fact, there was an entire town in France that accidentally consumed bread that contained... It's very similar to mercury poisoning, which is fucking mind-blowing because Mercury is the planet associated with Hermes Thoth, which is the being associated with these teachings and basically what psychedelics do. You know what I mean? Like, what the hell? But that's how the universe, signs, symbols, hints, clues, the writings on the wall, the rest is up to you. Integration. You have to integrate what the universe reveals. Remarkable. So, but I suspect, actually, at least in the lineages that come to us from Egypt, which may connect Pythagoras to the Scottish Rite, because you have to understand the modern mystery schools are actually a composite of the mysteries that came before them. Scottish Rite Freemasonry will absorb anything useful that it is aware of, right? That's what the whole point of it is, really. There's no real dogma or teaching of Freemasonry. It's just Kabbalah and, all of these esoteric, everything useful and powerful that they've discovered throughout history is all, sort of gathered together, and that's what the body of Freemasonry really is. So I was just considering that I think it's the mysteries of Egypt specifically that would have used Acacia and Syrian rue, and I also thought that the word kaikion, which is how this beverage was referred to in Greece, um, it means to mix, and I thought that implied the use of more than one plant, which is why I was a bit skeptical of Hoffman's um, fermented rye, infected rye theory, because kaikion means to mix. But considering where they were in the world, Greece, I don't know if Syrian rue grows there. Probably does, but I'm certain of the Egyptian thing. And so in the Egyptian mysteries, it almost certainly would have been Acacia and Syrian rue. And for those of you that are not familiar, that basically is ayahuasca. It's the same chemical components as ayahuasca. And still to this day, when a Freemason dies, they sprinkle acacia leaves over his grave. So again, this connection of Hermes, Thoth, to DMT and death, this knowledge to the afterlife, the sprinkling of the physical world portal, the leaves that gave us that portal on the death of bed of the initiate, on his, carcass, whatever, his grave. It's absolutely certain, in my mind at least, that that's what that's about. In fact, the 33rd degree secret, it's like the eagle and the lion, and other things of which we know but do not speak, but men have conjectured that there may be that the preservation of this beverage is reserved for the highest levels in the modern Scottish Rite. I wouldn't be surprised. Why is the acacia that happens to contain DMT sacred? No, LSD does not cause. LSD 25 causes insanity in people that have not taken it. The reality, I think, is that people are already insane. The conditioning, as I get older, man, I was almost hoping, like, as I entered my 40s and all of this, that I would, like, gradually start to realize that, maybe I was wrong and somehow just become normal and it would all make sense to me or something. And the opposite has happened. I think people, when that happens to people, it's because the conditioning and the pressure to conform has just eroded their common sense and intelligence. People are already insane, and so LSD can actually cause, not cause, but if you're predisposed to schizophrenia, for example, it can trigger latent mental health issues. However, interestingly, it can also be used to treat them. So that's kind of an interesting aspect of this, is that if you have a latent mental illness and you don't know about it, and you take LSD and find out, good, as long as you're not harmed during your psychotic break, because it is going to give doctors, if they have any sense, a chance to hopefully using psychedelics to reverse the schizophrenia. And unfortunately, research on LSD and schizophrenia is in its early stages, but I do know that it's one of the applications that they're looking at clinically is to reverse schizophrenia. It just goes to show how much brain fuckery has been employed by the propaganda machine against the citizens of the world. I mean, people were brought up to believe, the generation right before mine, really, all of us, but I think, people maybe 10 years older than me got it the worst. the 1980s, you know, all that crap. They really believed that psychedelics made you insane and stupid. And as it turns out, you know, Plato and Aristotle and, you know, all these people that were like hundreds of years beyond the rest of the human race used these things in order to attain, you know, at least partly to attain to those lofty positions. It's the truth is exactly the opposite of what they told everyone. And it's beyond criminal. It's absolutely beyond criminal. Um, Now, something to remember is that just as mystery school teachings don't just make you nice and fluffy and kind and humble, they're just tools that can be abused. Psychedelics are not necessarily just going to do good things for people, particularly LSD. LSD is the most efficacious at catalyzing neurogenesis and enhancing neuroplasticity of all of the psychedelics that have been looked at, which is interesting. I would have thought it would have been DMT, but it's not. It's LSD, because the universe is wise. And when you're not vomiting and you don't have diarrhea every 5 minutes and you're trying to learn stuff, LSD is, you know, I mean, it just makes sense that it would just be more useful if the one with the least physical, it's least problematic physiologically of all of these other indole ring hallucinogens, and it's the best to help you with learning, basically, and to restore the memory. Um, I feel like I went a little bit off track there, but the reality is that all of these psychedelics, when used properly, with the proper guidance or proper techniques, you know, oh, that's what I was saying. Like, you know, LSD is not just going to make someone a saint. It's not about that. You have to have the intention. Like people that are drug addicts would take LSD and not necessarily. It's just another drug, and that's kind of all that would happen. But that's because it's how they were using it. You know what I mean? You have to have the intention that it's going to. You have to choose how it's going to reprogram you and actually consciously direct the process. You can't just take it and then just, with no intention, it's just going to miraculously. It does that sometimes. It does. The psychedelic experience, in the sense that it can engender a spiritual experience, that it can catalyze those experiences, those can affect those kind of changes. I'm not saying that random use of psychedelics doesn't cause these changes. I'm just saying that it's very essential that people use them intentionally, because otherwise the results are not as guaranteed. Actually, Fernando, I think there are different types of schizoaffective disorder, and for example, ethnobotanists and anthropologists have used essential schizophrenia to describe every shaman that ever lived, basically. That if you're a legitimate shaman, you have a type of schizophrenia. And so, what schizophrenia is, and I noticed when I was very young that I could like go to completely whacked out, you know, schizophrenic babbling, and I totally could just get in there with them. There was one guy that lived in my town that I used to do this with all the time, you know, and my girlfriend at the time would actually watch sometimes, and she's just like, that is amazing, you know, that you can do that. And it's because I totally understood where his hallucinations, you know, like there's this weird logic that I'm familiar with, I guess. I don't know how else to explain it. So I think that what happens is that the filters that normally narrow our bandwidth of consciousness down to a manageable spectrum are permanently disabled in the schizophrenic person. So whereas, and then eventually it overwhelms you, you know, I mean, if I'm on acid really, really strong for 12 hours, it can get to the point where it's taxing. You know, if you eat a 10 strip, you're like, ah, you know, after a while, am I going to lose my mind? Um, and so I can see how after a week of that, you might start to actually break down. And I think that that's what's going on with schizophrenics, is that they're actually not just crazy, but their filters are down, and just receiving a tremendous amount of sensory input. I think that's ultimately what we're going to discover about autism. That may be the reverse, or that it's wildly swinging these filters from two. It's like the brain is overcompensating. So the autistic is one moment completely overwhelmed by all the sensory input. The filters are totally down, and then the next moment they're focused to a fine point as a compensatory response that's automatic. And so that's why we observe this craziness with autistic spectrum people. That's what's actually happening. Um, so yeah, I don't know that I agree with your analysis of schizophrenia, although that may be one type, and that's certainly a type of nut that you're describing. Um, so no, actually, the irony is that LSD can make you permanently sane. And the damage that can be done to us. I know this as a trauma survivor, a survivor of mentally ill mother, abuse from both parents. My father figure was just, I feel bad for him. He has a good heart, and he actually took the blame for most of my mother's abuse. And we all believed her because, it's just, okay, well, the man, it's so easy to blame the man, right? It took me until I was an adult to realize, yeah, he was fucked up, but it wasn't. Anyways, so I had a tremendous amount of stuff, and I'm, even though I'm an extreme case, it still surprises me how revelatory psychedelics can be over the course of your entire life. It's like they never really run out of stuff to show you. And the reality is that old patterns can reassert themselves, especially where you're lacking in vigilance. These old patterns will reassert themselves. Um, and life creates new traumas and new challenges. And my psychedelic experiences still are, every single time I think something is gained. And the old argument that a lot of people used to make is like, well, how come you have to keep taking them or whatever? It's like, well, why did you go to therapy for 5 years? What are you talking about? Like, people would invalidate the psychedelic experience by saying that it has to be repeated, therefore it's not legitimately helping. I've never heard of anyone saying, well, I meditated once and when I walked away I was all good. Like, no one ever said that ever. Um, so it's just weird, the kind of ways that people will invalidate these experiences. Um, because the same standards are not used to validate anything else. So I'm not sure I understand what happened there. Maybe it's also that people just think it's too good to be true, or that it's cheating. Cheating is a weird one because high dose psychedelics are not easy, man. I don't know why anyone would think that that's. It's one of the reasons that ayahuasca is not really subject to abuse. It's in my opinion not really fun. I would never do it for fun. I don't understand how there are medicine people that are like, yeah, this is gonna be like just loads of fun, and then after the ceremony they're like, oh, it was just beautiful and wonderful, and it sounds like they just went into some fairyland. And then I remind myself that they probably just drank half a cup, and they're just saying what everyone what I mean, what everyone else says, and they think that's how they're supposed to act, so they do. That's how people are. Because in my experience, ayahuasca is physically difficult. Vomiting and chills and diarrhea and just the weirdness of it all can be a lot psychologically. I think the combination of all of the physical stuff with what's happening in terms of the visions, can be quite a challenge, right? Because it kind of reminds the body of death. Like your body's going like, wait, DMT, freezing cold, I must be dead, you know? And so then the fear response. Turns out though that the cold is only because of vasoconstriction. That used to freak me out to no end when I would drink ayahuasca, and I got cold. I thought I was dying. Yeah, Fernando. Well, of course, that's how it is, man. I'm actually, to be honest, I am appalled at the strength with which old patterns and trauma can reassert themselves. Um, Even a few months ago, I had really got blindsided, I guess I'll say, at a really bad time, with just stuff that I guess I could not deal with, and I was not processing it in a healthy way. It can still happen, you know. So yeah, that's good to be aware of that as well, because I think people's expectations with things like ayahuasca is that you just drink it 6 or 7 times and you're all good now, so you don't have to have your guard up, and then you get blindsided and you realize it's not how it is. Not to diminish the usefulness of these tools, but yeah. So it's almost 10 o'clock, and we're expecting guests, and I realize that I have already revealed all of the secrets that I can reveal without getting my tongue cut out. I think I started to talk about the parallels with Hermes and Lucifer, but I never got there, which is fine, because the next installment of reactions to Bill Cooper's mystery series is going to be to his Lucifer worship video, which I am totally looking forward to, sort of, and I'm sure it's going to be absolutely crammed full of bullshit, because the reality is that anyone with even a sprinkling of education realizes that Lucifer never existed, that there was never a being called Lucifer, and that what Lucifer actually is an attempt to demonize consciousness itself. And yes, there are idiots in the world that believe that by doing evil things, there is an imaginary being called Lucifer that will assist them in their dumb fuckery. But the reality is that there are religious people of all persuasions that do that. How many of these mass shooters have claimed that they're doing God's work? It's actually far more rare that you have people that kill a bunch of people and then they say, like, oh yeah, well, the devil told me to do it. I was Lucifer. you know what I mean? That's, I can think of like Son of Sam, and he may have just been trying to come up with an excuse that people would believe. Oh, my dog was possessed by the devil, and my dog, you know what I mean? It's just, but anyways, I'm glad that I didn't start talking about Hermes Lucifer connection, because that will be the next light stream that is connected. So we're going to do this pretty frequently. I'll go out into the jungle and eat a few mushrooms and then come back. And after I'm done with the insufferable duty of editing the video, I'm hoping I can do it in one take this time, because the audio got out of control, because I didn't know what I was doing, and it took me hours and hours, days to fix it. So I'm hoping this time I'll just like snap, and then put it out, and it'll be good. Because honestly, by the time I was done editing this last one, I was like, I'm never doing this again. But, I've calmed down a little bit. Please do hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon, where you can join our secret streams, or you can make a one-time contribution via Zelle or PayPal or cryptocurrency. We really do appreciate it, because we don't get much for the time and effort. And really, the way I look at it is that you guys are compensating me for burying my nose in books and studying this stuff my whole goddamn life. It's a lifetime of contemplation that has yielded the perspective that I have now. And it was not just studies of the mystery schools and initiation even into various mystery schools, but study of the natural sciences. And man, I did go off on the mystical aspects of this, but I didn't talk a lot about the rest of it. That's kind of unfortunate. But I originally had planned to do this live stream when I was going to have unlimited time. So I did not get to the fact that it's really important to temper all of this stuff with grounding knowledge and to stay abreast of the natural sciences and to sort of keep your journey congruent so that you're developing spiritually, your development spiritually is consistent with your understanding of the physical world, because that's how they are. They're reflections of each other. And there are a lot of really toxic beliefs that have been almost standardized. And one of those is that you can't use rational thinking and critical thinking to understand things of the spirit world and God and all of that. And that's not true. It's just patently false. And it's really dangerous and dumb that people have convinced people otherwise. You use the same set of tools to discernment and critical thinking in the DMT space as you would in the physical world, and certainly whatever you learn spiritually, you're the only purpose of it is to make some kind of investiture in the here and now with it. So it's really important to stay grounded through all of this. I lost my grounding once, and I don't know that I ever really fully recovered yet. Certainly not in the material world. So it's something that you don't want to overestimate your magic and lose your footing. The price for that, it can be severe. So don't let the New Age gurus convince you because people are in a big hurry to pay people to convince them of things that they want to believe. Don't be one of those people. Thank you so much for watching my content and supporting me, hopefully. And I will see you guys in the next light stream in a few days. Sure. Oh, and by the way, I finally got some headphones, so I'm going to start doing music live streams where the backing tracks, vocals, everything are going to be mixed in a DAW and then sent out. So it's going to be a huge improvement over the amateur music streams that I have been capable of producing up until the current juncture. The one problem that I have is that there are going to be guests here at our retreat for the next 7 weeks, so I'm not going to have much time to work on those music streams. I'm going to be pretty much drinking ayahuasca 3 times a week for the next 2 months, which is fine. It's good, actually, but it doesn't leave me much energy or time for other stuff. So look forward to that eventually. Thank you guys so much for spending this time with me, and we will see you again very soon.